Very good morning, students. Today the topic is infertility. As you know, infertility is a very important topic as it includes both male and female infertility, and usually there is very mental distress when there is a failure to conceive by a couple, and so they go to different doctors, and usually the gynecologists and reproductive endocrinologists and psychiatrists also treat the patient. So it is an important topic of gynecology, that is infertility, and it is the inability or failure of a couple practicing frequent intercourse and not using contraception to fail to conceive a child within 1 year. So when there is a failure to conceive within 1 year, so after 1 year or more, they are declared as infertility. So you see, they should have frequent intercourse and also without any use of contraceptive. So it affects, infertility affects about 15 to 20% of couples. And normally in young couples, in first 1 month, 25% conceive if they want, and 70% conceive after 6 months, and usually about 80 to 90% conceive by 1 year. And only an additional 5% will conceive in additional 6 to 12 months. So usually in average 80% will conceive within 1 year, and next year, in second year, another 10% will conceive, and the rest 10% is unexplained infertility. So usually first year they conceive about 80 to 90%. Then what are the etiology, causes? As infertility means male and female infertility, both are included. So both are responsible, male and female are responsible. So there are male factors and also female factors, and in some cases there are combined factors, and others there is unexplained, so which is known as unexplained infertility. So male factors or male infertility accounts for about 30% of cases. Then female factors in about 40 to 55%, and combined male and female factors responsible for 10 to 20% of cases, and unexplained infertility is about 10 to 15% cases. Or in grossly, male is responsible in 30% cases, female is responsible for 30% cases, and both combined, male and female, in next 30% cases, and unexplained is 10%. So male and female are equally responsible for the infertility. So nobody should be blamed. So first, what are the male factor? What are the male infertility? So male should be evaluated simultaneously with the female. So both should be evaluated simultaneously, and they should be counseled from the very beginning, and detail. They should be examined, and history should be taken and should be examined simultaneously, both at a time, at first visit. And the causes of male infertility are, there it may be reversible or not reversible. So reversible causes are varicocele, obstructive azoospermia, and the not reversible causes, that is ejaculatory dysfunction, inoperative obstructive azoospermia. So there may be also genetic abnormalities. There may be pretesticular, testicular, and post-testicular causes of male infertility. Pretesticular, testicular, and post-testicular causes of male infertility. So what are the pretesticular etiology of male infertility? First is hypothalamic disorder. As you know, for spermatogenesis, hypothalamo-pituitary and axis is also most important. And hypothalamic disorders are hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. So, pretesticular causes of male infertility are hypothalamic disorders, that is hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, then tumors of hypothalamus, and any infective diseases like tuberculosis, sarcoidosis, histiocytosis, and use of drugs like antihypertensive, then anti-cancer drugs and others also is responsible for the pretesticular causes of male infertility. Then there may be pituitary causes like congenital, maybe, and tumors and radiation or radiotherapy or any granuloma present. Then peripheral organs like adrenal disorders, liver failure, and also thyroid disorders, which may cause secondary causes or secondary disorder of the hypothalamo-pituitary. Then testicular causes of infertility. It may be causes involved to the testis, like chromosomal abnormalities. Chromosomal abnormalities also cause the abnormalities of the testis, like Klinefelter syndrome 47XXY, that is here also responsible, and mixed gonadal dysgenesis and other chromosomal abnormalities are partial androgen insensitivity and genetic disorders of spermatogenesis. Then local conditions like varicocele, cryptorchidism, trauma, and orchitis due to any infection, and radiation or radiotherapy, and chemotherapy, and tight underclothing. Then substance abuse, alcohol, smoking, and caffeine. These also cause infertility, male infertility. And occupational exposure to heat and toxin. Because for spermatogenesis, 1 to 2 degree Fahrenheit lower temperature is required in the testis for spermatogenesis. So if there is increased heat, like in case of also varicocele and tight underclothing, there is increased heat of the testis, so it hampers spermatogenesis. Then post-testicular etiology of infertility. Then it includes abnormalities of the epididymis and congenital block in the testis and congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens, and acquired blocks in the ejaculatory duct may be due to infection or trauma or surgery, and presence of anti-sperm antibodies which may immobilize or agglutinate the sperm. Then there may be erectile dysfunction, and some cases are also of idiopathic male infertility where the cause is not known, with the standard investigations, the cause could not be found out. That is known as idiopathic male infertility in some cases. So most important is basal block, vas difference block there may be, or testicular production of sperm or spermatogenesis when it anchors in the testis. That is more important, testicular. So after this is the spermatogenesis. For spermatogenesis, hypothalamo-pituitary axis should be normal because FSH and LH controls the spermatogenesis, and also it is controlled by the Y chromosome. The FSH, merely the follicular stimulating hormone, mainly controls the spermatogenesis, and LH also is responsible for the spermatogenesis in the testis. So after spermatogenesis, which takes about 74 days, as average, spermatogenesis takes about 74 days, and from the testis to the epidermis, it takes about 12 to 20 days, and which is about 16 days. So total about 90 days average from the path. Traversing path is 16 days. So spermatogenesis usually 74 plus 16 days, that is 90 days, 3 months minimum. So from after spermatogenesis completed, it comes to the epidermis and to the vas deferens. Then it mixes with the fluids of the seminal vesicle, that is containing fructose, prostaglandin, and bicarbonate. And also it mixed with the prostatic fluid with enzymes, different enzymes, zinc and phospholipids. So it forms the ejaculate or semen. So the semen includes spermatozoa and fluids from the seminal vesicle and fluids from the prostate. So all are important, FSH, LH, and as you know, for spermatogenesis, the temperature should be 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit lower than the body temperature in the testis, and there should be androgenic circumstances in the testis. So there is formation of androgen, testosterone, and dihydroepiandrogen sulfate, and also androgen binding protein. So there is increased androgen level in case of testis, which helps in the spermatogenesis. So spermatogenesis should be proper for the fertility. Then female factors also responsible for, or it is known as female infertility, and different factors like ovulatory dysfunction responsible for 40% of cases, tubal factors responsible for 40%, and uterine factors in 10%, and cervical factor and peritoneal factors are responsible in 5% each. So ovulatory dysfunction in 40%, tubal factor 40%, uterine factor 10%, and cervical factor 5%, and peritoneal factor 5%. So first is ovulatory dysfunction. As you know, ovulation is also important for the fertility, and its dysfunction of the ovulatory dysfunction is also responsible for the female infertility. It may be due to mainly emotional stress and below normal percent of body fat, or also excessive body fat, excessive BMI also responsible, and other things are smoking and other substances, alcohol also. Then ovulatory dysfunction usually causes for 40% infertility, not 15. It is 40% of infertility, and usually it is diagnosed by menstrual irregularities and basal body temperature charting and ovulation prediction kit and serum progesterone levels. I think you know what are the tests for the diagnosis of ovulation. And what are the causes of ovulatory dysfunction? That is mainly polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is now coming up more commonly. That is more responsible. About 70% cases of ovulatory dysfunction is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And other causes of ovulatory dysfunction are hypothalamic anovulation and hyperprolactinemia and premature ovarian failure. When there is ovarian failure occurs prematurely before the menopause or before very early, then also there is infertility. According to WHO classification, the disorders of ovulation are 3 types: type 1, type 2, and type 3. So in type 1, it is hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism. Here there is FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone are low level and with low estradiol. And in case of type 2, that is normogonadotrophic and hypogonadism. Here the gonadotropins are normal, means FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, is normal level and with normal estradiol level also. Then in type 3, hypergonadotrophic hypogonadism. Here the gonadotropics are high. Hypergonadotrophic means there is high FSH and LH with low estradiol. So these are the main classification of ovulation disorders. Accordingly, the causes will be found out and treated. The first one is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the most important one of the ovarian dysfunction. So it is the symptoms are oligomenorrhea, amenorrhea, or hyperandrogenism. So I think you know how to diagnose polycystic ovarian syndrome, like any 2 of the clinical features if present, like oligomenorrhea or amenorrhea, hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovary. Out of these 3, any 2, when it is present, it diagnoses polycystic ovarian syndrome. Then its prevalence is 5%, and among with the ovarian dysfunction, it is about 70%. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is about 70% of ovarian dysfunction. And there is a clinical evidence of hirsutism, acne, there is hyperandrogenism, and there is also obesity, and on investigation, there is elevated level of testosterone and dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate. And there is polycystic ovaries on ultrasound. The polycystic, these many polycysts are present in the peripheral part of the ovary. So it is diagnosed by the ultrasound also. So oligomenorrhea, amenorrhea, and hyperandrogenism and polycystic ovaries. Diagnosis polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS. So to treat weight loss, if there is BMI body mass index is more than 30, and the weight loss should be advised, and clomiphene to induce ovulation, and with metformin also. Metformin, it can be used, clomiphene with metformin for PCOS. Separate chapter, PCOS is separate chapter. I think that will be dealt separately. And then hypothalamic anovulation, low levels of gonadotropin releasing hormone, and low normal levels of FSH and LH, and low levels of endogenous estrogen. As you know, gonadotropin releasing hormone is released from the hypothalamus, which stimulates the follicular stimulating hormone, and LH from the pituitary, and the estrogen from the gonad. So when there is low level of gonadotropin releasing hormone, so there is low level of FSH and LH and also estrogen. So this is associated with low BMI, less than 20, and high intensity exercise. If the patient has severe exercise, in high intensity exercise and extreme diets and stress, then it causes hypothalamic anovulation. And mainly the treatment is lifestyle modification. Then another cause of is hyperprolactinemia. Again, due to pituitary adenoma and psychiatric medicines. And again, as there should be hypothyroidism should be inquired for, which causes hyperprolactinemia, and it is diagnosed by MRI for macro or micro adenoma. There may be presence of macro and micro adenoma of the pituitary. So MRI is helpful diagnosis macro and micro adenoma. Accordingly, the management will vary, and usually it is treated with bromocriptine, that is dopamine agonist. And after correction of the hyperprolactinemia, 80% of women will ovulate and 80% will get pregnant. So out of 80% of ovulated women, 80% will get pregnant. So usually it is most successful with the bromocriptine, and if there is pregnancy, the drug should be discontinued. Then other causes, then causes of tubal damage. So tubal infertility or tubal causes. So tube should be healthy for conception to occur. So tube should be patent, and also the fimbria should be healthy to pick up the ovum. So tubal status is also fallopian tubes. Status of the fallopian tubes is also important for the conception to occur. So if there is damage of the fallopian tubes, then it will hamper the conception. So what are the causes of tubal damage? It may be pelvic infection. Infection is the most important cause of tubal damage, like chlamydial infection or gonococcal infection, and post-abortal infection. After abortion also there is chance of infection causing tubal damage or tubal block even, and puerperal infection also may cause tubal damage, and genital tuberculosis. Then tubal damage may occur due to tubal pregnancy or ectopic pregnancy, and endometriosis of the tubes, and pelvic surgery. These are the causes of tubal damage which hamper the conception. So pelvic infection, tubal pregnancy, endometriosis, and pelvic surgery may cause tubal damage which may interfere or hamper the conception. Then uterine factor, which is responsible for 10% of cases of female infertility, and cervical in 5% of cases. So what are the causes of uterine and cervical. So uterine, there may be congenital defects. Uterine may be absent or bicornuate or septate, and there may be presence of fibroids, submucous fibroid. You see the figure shows submucous fibroid which may hamper implantation, and also there is hyperestrogenic condition, so it hampers the endometrial status, healthy endometrium for the implantation. So submucous fibroid, very small submucous fibroid may also hamper the implantation. So it is the responsible for infertility. Then polyps, it may be endometrial polyp, which is also responsible for implantation hampering. So fibroids and polyps also responsible for the infertility to occur. Then congenital defects also may be there, and another is Asherman syndrome or adhesion. When there is adhesion of the two both endometrial surfaces occur, then there is Asherman syndrome, which occurs due to severe curettage after any whenever required therapeutic curettage, and also any infection like tuberculosis infection, it may cause Asherman syndrome or adhesion between the two surfaces of the endometrium. So there is endometrial cavity is obliterated. So it is also responsible for the uterine factor as a uterine factor for the infertility. Next is cervical mucous abnormality. So it is also responsible, cervical factor is responsible for 5% of female infertility. So what are the cervical mucus is the most important one for conception to occur, because when sperm is deposited high in vagina, the first barrier is cervix. So it acts as the biological barrier for the sperm. Then so it has to cross the cervical mucus, and also here also there is in cervical mucus there is capacitation of the sperm occurs, which helps in the ascending of the sperm to the uterine cavity. So the biological barrier, first barrier is the cervical or cervical mucus. So when there is cervical mucus abnormalities, then it also hampers conception. So what are the cervical mucus abnormalities? Maybe presence of antibodies that attack sperm. So there may be anti-sperm antibodies present in the cervical mucus, usually the IgG and IgA type isotype of anti-sperm antibodies are present in the cervical mucus, and it may agglutinate or immobilize the sperm. So it helps, there is infertility occurs. So then cervical mucus can form a plug that blocks passage of sperm. Usually in the proliferative phase of the menstrual cycle, the cervical mucus is thin, which helps for the easy ascent of the sperm. But in the secretory phase, due to progesterone effect, there is cervical mucus is thick and which blocks the ascent of the sperm into the uterine cavity. So it can be treated by intrauterine injection of sperm. So directly sperm can be injected into the uterine cavity if there is hostile cervical mucus. Then it may be post-surgical. There may be stenosis or mucus changes. Surgical, there after any surgery on the cervix, like cauterization, amputation, conation, there may occur cervical stenosis, which may block the ascent of the sperm, and also there is less cervical mucus secretion due to these surgeries, which also dangerous for the ascent of the spore, and also there is no capacitation of the spore if there is less cervical mucus due to amputation of cervix or cauterization or conization of the cervix. There is less cervical mucus secretion, so there is less capacitation of sperm, and so there is hampering of the ascent of the sperm into the uterine cavity. So another is also before peritoneal factors, that is another is also vaginal factors, also responsible for in 5% cases there may be atresia or any septum or transverse septum or septate vagina, or a very if there is intertus is tight, then also it causes dyspareunia. That is also taken into account. Those are the vaginal factors for infertility, which also responsible for the failure to conception. Then what are the peritoneal factors? The peritoneal factors also is important because it may affect the tubes and also ovaries, or the which hampers the conception to occur. So in female infertility, the peritoneal factors are also important. So peritoneal factors like adhesions due to peritubal, it may be adhesions may be peritubal or periovarian, and there may be tubal obstruction, and there may be kinking, simple kinking. Also, kinking of the tubes may also hamper the passage of the sperm, and formation of the rigid tubes, which is more common in case of tuberculosis. It also hampers the passage of the sperm, and tubovarian mass, which also obstructs the tubes, and also ovulation is hampered, and interference with the peritoneal fluid production. These are the causes of peritoneal factors, or different peritoneal factors, which are responsible for the failure of conception. So there may be also endocrine abnormalities. So different hormones should be studied, hypothyroidism especially, and hyperprolactinemia, and polycystic ovarian syndrome we have discussed, and also hypothalamic hypogonadism, especially in stress and exercise. Then when the couple comes, both should be counseled from the very beginning, and detailed history and history should be taken when both are present at a time. At the first visit, they should be present. Both couples should be present at a time, and in presence of both couples, detailed history should be taken. As usual, in gynec history, detailed history should be taken, and more stress to be given in history of the female, like menarche, puberty, and menstrual history, pregnancies, and abortions previous, and is there any use of birth control, or if there is dyspareunia or dysmenorrhea. Dyspareunia means maybe deep dyspareunia, which also responsible for the infertility, and sexually transmitted infections, and any abdominal surgery or galactorrhea presence, and weight loss or weight gain, and stress, exercise, drugs, and alcohol, and psychological. So detailed history should be taken, like medical history, family history, personal history, and sexual history. All details should be taken. Then after that, physical examination should be done also in detail, more commonly about weight and BMI, and thyroid should be examined, and skill, triacanthosis nigrans, especially in case of PCOS, and pelvic examination, and before that also general examination and also abdominal examination should be done, and post-speculum examination also should be done in detail to find out any cause, and pelvic examination should be done to know the any abnormality in the vagina, cervix, and uterus, and tube and ovaries can be diagnosed clinically, and rectal examination also should be done. Uterosacral nodularity, especially in case of endometriosis, it is present. Uterosacral nodules, or there is thickening of the uterosacral ligament, especially in case of endometriosis, and also it may be tender also, uterosacral tender. So detailed history and examination should be done, but this examination should be done separately. History should be taken of both couples at a time together, but examination should be done separately. Then again, in the case of male, detailed history again should be taken, and along with the history, and mainly sexual history, and prior fertility, is there any prior fertility is present, and any medications he is taking, like antihypertensive, anti-cancer drugs, and whether any history of presence of diabetes, mumps, or undescended testes, and any surgery, genital surgery. He has genital surgery. The male partner, if he has any genital surgery or trauma or infections, and erection disorder, and any drug or alcohol use or presence of stress, and if she has tight underwear and hot tubs and frequent coitus. The frequent coitus issue, the couple should have frequent coitus, means about 4 to 5 times per week. Otherwise, if they will have only once, there may not be conception. So they should have regular, frequent coitus. Thus, that coital history or should be taken. Then physical examination, like what is the whether there is any gynecomastia present, and sexual development, and testis should be examined about whether it is atrophic or a normal volume, and epididymis, vas, prostate by palpation, and also check for varicocele. Presence of varicocele also hampers the conception because of increased temperature in the testis, which hampers the spermatogenesis. So at the first visit, the minimum investigations should be semen analysis, and to confirm ovulation, and to confirm the patterns of the fallopian tubes. These three things should be done. So the first visit, the aim is to find out the cause of the infertility, and also to treat the any cause, and also counseling should be done. What are the investigations or tests should be done, when to be done, and what the cost of the investigations, and what the possibility of the unexplained infertility. Everything should be explained to the couple at the first visit, and so semen analysis, and confirmation of the ovulation, and confirmation of the tubal patency, most important. As you know, confirmation of ovulation is done by the charting of the basal body temperature, and ovulation predictor kits for detection of LH shots, that is also available, and progesterone level also should be determined on day 21. So these are the hormones also to be tested. At last, thyroid stimulating hormone, as there is chance of hypothyroidism, which causes hyperprolactinemia and causes also impotence, and dihydroepiandrosterone for PCOS diagnosis, and follicular stimulating hormone and LH and estradiol all should be determined, and the cervical culture should be also done. So FSH level less than 10 milli international unit per ml indicates normal ovarian reserve. So ovarian reserve should be normal for the conception to occur, because ovulation can occur, which is important for the conception. So normal ovarian reserve causes normal ovulation. So the FS level should be less than 10 milli international unit per ml. So if the FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, is more than 10, it indicates decrease of ovarian reserve. So FSH should be done with estradiol, and estradiol of less than 50 picogram per deciliter indicates normal ovarian reserve, and when it is more than 80 picogram per deciliter, then it is less decreased ovarian reserve. Then pelvic ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound is most important one for the management or investigation of the infertility, and majority of ultrasounds are done transvaginally for infertility, and during this ultrasound scans can provide information of the ovaries, endometrial lining and uterus, and also the follicles can be also the size of the follicles. That is also important for the conception to occur. It is also responsible to evaluate the ovarian reserve, and also uterine shape can be diagnosed by ultrasound, and also the fallopian tubes are open or blocked, that can be also diagnosed. So follicular development monitoring of the ovaries, that can be also diagnosed by ultrasound, and also thickening of the endometrial lining. The pre-ovulation follicle should be 18 to 20 mm size, and the endometrial thickening should be more than 8 mm. That is suitable or for the implantation to occur. And it also used, ultrasound is also used during in vitro fertilization or egg retrieval to guide the needle through the vaginal wall to the ovaries. And if there is pregnancy, then reproductive endocrinologists, there should be also detailed examination and detailed management should be done by them. Then sonohysterogram, it is a specialized ultrasound that involves transferring a saline solution into the uterus via a catheter. So the uterine pathology and also tubal pathology can be diagnosed by the installation of the saline into the uterus. And when the saline is instilled into the uterine cavity, it fills the uterus and making easier, it's very easier to visualization the shape and any possible adhesions within. So any adhesion of the uterine cavity can be also diagnosed by this sonohysterogram, by the installation of the saline into the uterine cavity. Then what are the tests for ovulation? So mid-luteal serum progesterone level measurement on day 21, when there is more than 3 nanogram per ml, it confirms ovulation. And BBT chart, basal body temperature chart. It indicates biphasic pattern in ovulatory cycles. And next is urinary LH, also indicates whether there is LH surge is there, indicating ovulation, which occurs after 34 to 36 hours of LH surge, and when it is the level more than 40 milli-international unit per ml. Then transvaginal ultrasound can diagnose ovulation, and usually serial ultrasounds are done from day 10 alternate days, usually to monitor the follicle, dominant follicle. When it is 8 to 20 millimeter pre-ovulation, it is ideal for ovulation to occur. The growth is usually 1 to 2 millimeter per day of the growth of the follicle, and follicle collapses after ovulation. Though it is expensive, but it is also helpful. It is also used in ART cycle, artificial reproductive cycle. Then another method is endometrial biopsy for diagnosis of ovulation. It is nowadays done routinely, and it indicates secretory changes due to ovulation, and it is usually done after 21 days or within 26 days of menstrual cycle in the secretory phase of the cycle. So to diagnose ovulation, when there is presence of secretory changes in the endometrium in this after 21 days of menstrual cycle, it indicates secretory phase, which is the indicative of the ovulation. It can also diagnose LPD, luteal phase defect, and tuberculosis. In luteal phase defect, when suppose the endometrial biopsy is done on 25th day of the menstrual cycle, then the endometrial changes corresponds to the 22nd day of the menstrual cycle. So at least 3 days lag period is there for diagnosis of LPD, luteal phase defect. So for diagnosis of LPD, the 2 tests should be done in 2 cycles. So there should be minimum or at least 3 days lag period in case of menstrual endometrial biopsy. Then what are the tests to assess tubal patency? That is dilatation and insufflation, which is not nowadays done. It is done actually by the insufflation or introducing air or carbon dioxide through the cervix to the uterine cavity, and then it is to know the tubal patency. When there is fall in the pressure and there is hissing sound, then it indicates tubal patency. But nowadays it is not done, and because of other methods, good methods are available. So next to assess the tubal patency is hysterosalpingography, which is also done commonly, and here also radio opaque dye is introduced into the uterine cavity, and so the X-ray is done, and any abnormality in the uterus and also tubal block can be diagnosed. Here the advantage is site of block, tubal block can be diagnosed. A side of the tubal block, which site and site of the tubal block can be diagnosed by HSG, hysterosalpingography. Then another method is saline infusion sonography. Here the saline is infused through the cervix and the uterine cavity, and by that tubal patency can be done. Here there is no, it also can be, it can diagnose the uterine abnormalities or the any tubal abnormality. Another method is hysterosalpingo contrast sonography. Here another dye is introduced into the uterine cavity and the uterine abnormality and the tubal abnormality can be diagnosed. Then sonohysterosalpingography, here also saline infusion sonography same. Then laparoscopy and chromopertubation. It is the gold standard for the diagnosis of tubal patency. Laparoscopy and chromotubation can be done to diagnose the tubal patency. Methylene blue is injected through the cervix, and if there is presence of methylene blue in the peritoneal cavity, indicates tubal patency. Then falloposcopy, it is also to study the fallopian tube. Entire tube is studied through the hysteroscope, which is flexible. Hysteroscope is introduced through the cervix and which studies the entire length of the tube, fallopian tube. Then salpingoscopy, it is a method to also for diagnosis of tubal patency, which is done by the laparoscope through the fimbrial end can be studied detail. So these are the methods of tubal patency. Then laparoscopic evaluation is done mainly, that is the gold standard of the tubal pathology, to know the tubal pathology. So what are the other information can be gained from the laparoscopic evaluation, like of the tubes, peritubal adhesions may be there, tubal block and tubal motility, and condition of the fimbria, which is also important for picking up the then hydrosalpinx, presence of hydrosalpinx, then ovaries, ovarian status, there may be endometrioma, adhesions, polycystic ovaries, or any tubo-ovarian mass. Then uterine abnormality like myomas and uterine anomalies, biconiotic uterus, and peritoneal factors like endometriosis and post-inflammatory adhesions and tuberculosis. So these are the informations can be obtained by the laparoscopic evaluation. That the benefits of laparoscopy evaluation are from the tips for detection of the tubal patency or block, site and motility, and hydrosalpinx and peritubal adhesions and fimbrial agglutination. Then in ovaries, there may be PCOS changes, endometriosis, pelvic inflammatory disease, and adhesions. Then uterus, anomalies or fibroid present, and peritoneal factors like adhesions, PID, endometriosis, and tuberculosis. And sometimes therapeutically, it has also value. Sometimes after laparoscopy evaluation, pregnancy occurs because there is dislodgement of the small block in the tube, which can be dislodged by the laparoscopic evaluation only. So sometimes it is seen that after laparoscopy evaluation and also hysteroscopy evaluation, pregnancy occurs spontaneously. Then what are tests for uterine factors? Hysterosalpingography, transvaginal ultrasonography, and saline infusion sonography, and hysteroscopy. Hysteroscopy is the gold standard for the uterine factors. So about sperm, that is also this is the sperm, and the most important is semen analysis. According to WHO 2010, this is the feature of the normal semen analysis with the lower limit of the lower limit. The volume should be 2 ml or more, and pH should be 7.2 to 7.8, and viscosity less than 3, and sperm concentration 20 million per ml, and total sperm count more than 40 million per ejaculate, and motility should be more than 50% progressive forward motility, and morphology more than 14% normal form, and viability 75% or more living, and leukocytes, presence of leukocytes less than 1 million per ml, and presence of round cells less than 5 million per ml, and sperm agglutination less than 10% spermatozoa with adherent particles. So this is the normal semen analysis. So what are the nomenclature? You should know aspermia means failure of the emission of semen. There is no semen on ejaculation. Then hypospermia means low semen volume, less than 2 ml. And oligospermia or oligospermia means when the sperm count is less than 20 million per ml. And polyzoospermia when the count is more than 350 million per ml. And azoospermia, absence of spermatozoa or no spermatozoa in the semen. Then asthenospermia, reduced sperm motility, and leukocytospermia, and increased white cells in the semen. Then necrospermia, spermatozoa are dead or motionless. Then teratospermia, when there is more than 70% spermatozoa with abnormal morphology. Then oligoasthenoteratospermia means all the three when added, testaments all three variables: oligospermia and asthenospermia and teratospermia. So what are the further investigation detail in the, if required, in the male partner? That is endocrine evaluation like follicular stimulating hormone, LH, prolactin, and serum testosterone, and karyotyping for the diagnosis of Klinefelter syndrome and Y microdeletions, and genetic testing, and transrectal ultrasonography should be done for diagnosis of ejaculatory duct obstruction, and scrotal ultrasonography is done for evaluation of the testis and epididymis, and vasography is done for knowing the patency of the vas difference, and testicular biopsy for the presence of the spermatogenesis. Presence testicular biopsy is done also for spermatogenesis. So after 3 months, histosalpingogram should be done. Then another is ovarian reserve. That is also another important point for the ovulation to occur. So a good test of ovarian reserve should be predictive of conception. So markers of ovarian reserve are this age. When age of the woman is more than 35 years, then there is ovarian reserve is decreased, and serum FSH, when it is increased, then it indicates ovarian reserve is less, and estradiol and inhibin B level is decreased, and anti-Mullerian hormone level is also decreased, and antral follicle count, when there is less than 10 antral follicle in both ovaries, that it indicates decreased ovarian reserve, and ovarian stromal blood flow when is decreased. So these are all the matters. So these are all the AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone also important, that when it decrease. For knowing the ovarian reserve. So these are all about this detailed history, and also examination should be done, and in some cases also both female and male factors are combined. 10 to 20% cases, and some cases also unexplained infertility there in 10% cases. And out of, in case of unexplained infertility, even if all the standard investigations are done, still then the cause is not known, that is unexplained infertility. But to our surprise, 40% of unexplained infertility conceives within 3 years without any treatment. So it may be psychological, mostly, and also some therapeutic value of the investigations. So this is all about infertility. Next class, we'll discuss management of infertility. Thank you. Any doubt? Doubt? No doubt. Okay, no doubt. Thank you very much. Next class, we'll discuss about management of the infertility. Thank you again.